Hello everyone, we're going to take a little bit of a detour off of the normal videos. Now earlier you had seen the video that I posted about the new 3D printer that I have picked up. So I thought I would give you guys a little review on it. There's a couple assumptions I'm going to make. First is that you kind of generally know how a 3D printer works. This is a extruded filament printer. What you're going to be seeing on the screen is both the software video as well as the actual video of it being printed. The software, it's a little easier to tell exactly what's going on. You can see as it lays line by line of the filament. But I just wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit. I noticed that there's a little bit of lacking information about this printer kind of on the internet and on YouTube in general. It is based off of the printer, the Prusa i3. This is a RepRap printer, so it's open source. You can go and find all the information on how to build it yourself, including software, hardware, all that interesting stuff. But I guess this one was a modified version. According to him, he made some improvements on it. What exactly, I'm not entirely positive. He stated, but I don't know what any of it necessarily meant. Another disclaimer, I don't know a whole lot about 3D printers. I know enough about hardware and software enough to assemble one, but beyond that, you're just going to have to take my word for it. So I guess I'll start at the beginning with getting this 3D printer. First off, shipping. Shipping was pretty good. It was coming from Hong Kong, so that made me a little bit nervous, but shipping was actually pretty quick. I figured it would be like around a month in which it would take to get it to me, but it ended up being, I think it was about 2 weeks. So it was surprisingly quick, considering the size of the box and the weight and everything. However, shipping was a little extravagant. The printer itself was $350, and then on top of that, the shipping itself was another $100. I don't know if that had to do with the weight and size. It most likely had to do with the weight and size, but I don't know if that could have really changed any or been brought down at all, but that was that. It came pretty well packaged. Everything was neatly kind of stuck in there. It wasn't a whole lot of wiggle room for stuff to kind of move around. I did end up with a broken piece of glass on my heat bed. It was nice that it came with one, as a lot of manufacturers won't ship their printers with glass just because of that fact. It was a little unfortunate that it came with one. Luckily, it already had the Teflon tape on it. Not Teflon, the Kapton. Kapton. I don't know how to say it, but either way, it's the heat-resistant tape. It already came with it on it, so it all came out in one piece, and that was easy to dispose of. But I had to end up getting a new piece of glass for the 3D printer. You can probably kind of see how thin the glass is. That's just what I was able to pick up. I'll have to look for an actual glass cutting store where I can get maybe a thicker piece of glass, because the issue I find with the thin one is it seems to lose heat pretty quickly once the fan kicks on. But other than that, nothing else was damaged. Everything else was quite well packaged, including the electronics and all that really sensitive stuff. The printhead and the heat bed did come pre-assembled, which was nice. It wasn't completely necessary, other than the fact that I guess maybe they required a little bit of soldering. But that was that. As for the quality of the materials, there's 3 different things I can talk about. There is the laser cut, I don't know what kind of wood you'd call it, hobby board. You know, it's just that layered plywood stuff, about a 1/4 inch thick. Most of that was pretty good. I mean, laser cut, it's going to be pretty exact. The one issue I did end up with is on the heat bed. As you can see that there's 2 layers, and the top one that's holding the heat bed and the bottom one, which I felt was actually a little warped along one corner. It wasn't a solid piece, so I'm guessing maybe as humidity and stuff like that, it warped a little bit. I may try to find a replacement for that, like an aluminum, just because it being warped, it makes leveling the heat bed a little difficult, but it hasn't been a huge issue. I mean, it isn't warped so badly that it's running into other things, but there is that to consider. So then there is the plastic printed parts. Those are primarily for like for holding the motors, like as you may not be able to see, but on the x-axis, which is the left to right, there is two parts on either, or one part on, there's two parts, one on either side that move up and down that are connected to the z-axis. And most of the printed parts were fairly decent. I mean, they must have been pretty, I can't really tell necessarily what the infill density is. The infill density being, like as you can see in the video here, like the honeycomb shape, how tightly packed that was. But everything seemed fairly rigid and there wasn't too many issues with the printed parts. I noticed there was a little bit of lifting on some of the less crucial parts, like some delaminating where the layers are coming apart. But nothing terribly crucial was ruined, I would say. So the printed parts I was okay with. Inside those printed parts, for the z-axis particularly, on the smooth rods, there's the ball bearings, which allow the part to slide smoothly up and down. I did have a little issues with those. It wasn't necessarily, I didn't have a problem putting it together, but more so when I pushed the smooth rods through, some of the little metal pellets actually kind of popped out of it, and that made me a little concerned because, I mean, as many of those as popped out, that decreases the, I don't even know what to call it. I mean, the less of those little bearings there are, the less smooth it's going to slide, is at least that makes sense in my mind, and them coming out concerns me a little bit. They shouldn't be coming out at all in the first place, but I mean, it still seems to slide up and down okay. I mean, it's not a huge issue, but it does make me question the quality of the bearings a little bit. And then the other thing is the threaded rods. For the most part, they're just used for structural purposes. The only ones that aren't are the little threaded rods on the z-axis, the ones that move up and down. Now, they work okay for the most part, but it seems like they aren't completely clean. And so occasionally when I go up high enough to a certain point, there must be like something stuck in the threads or something, and the z-axis kind of gets jammed up on one side, and that causes issues because if those either side get out of sync, then it's gonna mess up with the bed leveling and all that kind of stuff. So that was a little bit of an issue. I might go to the department store and see if I can get those replaced. I'm not sure if they'll have any better ones, but maybe I just need to take a wire brush to them and kind of just clean them up a little bit and remove any particulates that might be jamming them up. Overall, though, the quality seemed, I mean, par. It's nothing special. It's not anything high-end or anything like that. Motors, I can't really make any sort of judgment on those. I don't know enough about electronics to do that, but they seem to do what they're supposed to do. Once you have the voltage adjusted properly on the electronic driver board. But other than that, everything else was pretty standard. There wasn't any labeling on the parts. That made assembly a little bit of a problem. And which I guess we'll talk about assembly. Assembly, I don't even know where to start with assembly. For one thing, you're not given any instructions on how to put this together other than a thumb drive with which is really helpful. That it does come with a little mini SD card, because this thing can print from a mini SD card, and it comes with a little USB reader for that. And on the SD card are pictures of all of different angles of the printer, and that is extremely useful for assembling, but that's all you're given. There are a lot of PDFs and, you know, the 3D files for the actual printed parts, so if you want to print them yourself, they're on there, like if you want to print replacements or whatever, just in case. But the problem is it's all in Chinese, so it's not very useful to me. To a certain extent, I could copy the text out and drop it into a translation engine, but that only gets me so far. And even then, none of the PDFs contain step-by-step information on how to assemble it. I do want to give a special shout out to David of Korhonen CA. That's youtube.com/Korhonen CA. He's been extremely helpful in helping me assemble this, and I probably wouldn't have gotten nearly as far as I did without his help. So big shout out to him. But we kind of tossed emails back and forth as I was assembling this and getting the electronics set up. And I used some of his videos. You should go check them out if you end up getting this printer yourself. I used some of his videos in helping to assemble this in combination with the pictures. But, you know, that seems like a big oversight to me, to be selling this printer as parts. Like, you can't actually buy this printer from them fully assembled. You have to buy it as parts, and then to not include any sort of means to assemble it, like instructions. Like, you kind of just gotta go off of what seems like the right order of operations. And to a certain extent, that did extend my build time, because I would get things assembled and then I'd realize, oh, I was supposed to do this first, so I have to go back now, undo all this other thing, and then put this together and then reassemble it. I had to do that quite a few times, really. Well, not quite. I had to do it a couple of times, but it was severe enough that it was an issue. So that was hardware, but software was kind of a whole nother beast of its own. Now, I guess it comes with its own custom firmware, and according to the website, everything's all ready to go. Apparently mine wasn't ready to go. I had sent an email to Chris, the owner of the site that I had bought it from, and he said, oh, apparently the wrong firmware got uploaded to your driver board. So I was like, oh, okay. So I uploaded the new one, and everything seemed to work all right. It concerned me a bit that the right one wasn't uploaded in the first place, because what was happening was every time I tried to home the Z-axis, it would like jam up and start making this awful noise until I unplugged it. And that was a little concerning. I'm still trying to work it out, because the software, it has in the configuration, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but basically the steps of the motor to one unit, and the unit in this case being a millimeter, I believe. And it seems like it's a little off, well, quite a bit off in some cases, but like anytime I move the X and Y axis, like I'll move them 100 millimeters, and it's off by, 15 to 20 millimeters. And that's an issue, because that means it's scaling incorrectly. And if I need precision printed parts, then they're going to be overscaled, and I have to compensate for that. Also, in the case of the Z-axis, it seems like it's underscaled. So anytime I print a part, I have to overscale in the Z-axis in order for it to be tall enough. I printed a little companion cube from Portal, and it ended up being all squished. I might put a picture of that in this video, but yeah, I mean, it ended up being a little squished just because I didn't overscale in the Z-axis, and that was a little bit of a pain. So I have to adjust the settings there. But other than that, I mean, I've gotten it to a point where it's working okay. It's not ideal. You'll see at the end of this video, I mean, it's kind of ironic that it happened in this print that I was going to show you guys. But as soon as I finish printing, it homes the X-axis. What that means is it moves the X-axis to the 0 position. And as it started to home that, everything started going crazy, and basically it just kind of all jammed up. I don't know exactly what happened. I need to get myself a multimeter, because it has little potentiometers on the electronics driver board for tuning the voltage that goes to the motors. And I kind of did it based on one calibration guide that said turn it down until the motor starts to vibrate, and then turn it a little bit up just past that. And I think I don't think it's completely accurate, so I need to get a multimeter to get the voltages exactly correct, because that might have been what happened at the end of this print when the X motor decided to go haywire. You'll actually see me probably jump up in order to run and unplug it, because the unplugging was actually on the other side of my desk. But that was that. As for calibration, there's a couple of things you have to do. Each axis, the X, Y, and Z, have their little end stops. Y-axis, you don't necessarily have to deal with a whole lot. I mean, basically you want to make sure that it's far enough back that the nozzle of the extruder is close enough to the top. I mean, you got to make sure it's not going to run into any of the clips on the heat bed, but that's usually one that you just kind of set it and forget it. X-axis is pretty similar. I mean, it has a little thing. I think this was one of his the seller's personal upgrades to the machine, is it has a little place that you can actually specifically, attach the X-axis end stop. It's just a little switch basically that the extruder runs into, and it knows when that switch gets pushed, then it knows that it's at the 0 axis. The big problem that you're going to be messing with a lot is the Z-axis. Now you got two ways to tune your Z-axis. You have like a little screw that kind of changes the distance it has to move down before it stops. It's just kind of like for fine tuning. And then you have your actual heat bed itself. There's 4 screws, one at each corner of the heat bed, and you use that to kind of level it off. Because if you're not level, then your first layer may not stick. Like if it extrudes up too high, or or worse yet, if it goes down too low, it'll jam the nozzle into the heat bed. So playing with that, I kind of have to do it every single time I do a print, and it's a bit of a hassle just because it feels like the Z-axis gets out of alignment every time I print. And that might partially have to do with the left and right getting at different distances, but I mean, it's not a huge thing, but it does require a little more time every time I want to print, so there is that. As for the accuracy, I mean, I kind of spoke about how it was a little miscalibrated. It goes a little too far in the X and Y direction, not far enough in the Z direction. When I was talking earlier about the warped part on the heat bed, that made leveling the heat bed a bit of a problem, because I had to really tighten down about 3 of the screws, the 2 back and the front right, and the other one I had to leave just like barely connected on 1 or 2 threads maybe, just because it was warped. I mean, I can't really go beyond that in order if I need to raise up that corner more, and it's still a little low, but I can't raise it up any. Maybe I'm thinking if I get a thicker piece of glass, then I'll be able to, the heat bed itself will generally be up higher, and it'll give me a little more room for leveling that, but we'll see. But as for accuracy, I mean, it does as well as you could come to expect. You're not, as you can see here, I'm actually printing a little minifigure. I mean, it's for a pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons kind of game, and I just wanted to have my own little guy. So this is kind of like a I don't know, sort of a test for it. You can see in the video it has like he's holding like a little hammer, and the handle kind of comes down and it freestands. It kind of gets a little wobbly once we're in the parts where it gets a little freestanding. So you're not going to get any sort of extreme detail, but I mean, honestly, I wasn't expecting any kind of major detail. It does okay, surprisingly okay for what it is. But I think if you're expecting to print bigger parts with it and that's all you expect to do, I think you're going to be a lot happier with it. If you expect to do a lot of small stuff like this minifigure, then you might be disappointed, because as much detail and as fine a printing as you see on the computer side, you almost never get on the actual side, unless you spend a lot of time getting the calibrations just right and everything perfect as possible, basically giving it the best chance you can to complete that. But either way, so finally, I guess I could talk a little bit about the filament. I mean, I bought the filament from them. I figure it seemed like they had pretty cheap filament, which doesn't necessarily mean it was a good deal, because there's a couple of things. It is ABS plastic. There's 2 different kinds of plastic you generally print with, PLA and ABS. ABS is what they were selling, so that's what I got. ABS is basically the same kind of plastic as what Lego bricks are made of. So, it's plastic, but it doesn't really make a difference to me. The big thing with some plastics, I believe, is if they're going to have bubbles in them, that'll mess up your print, or if they absorb too much moisture, that'll also mess up your print, because it'll cause basically it'll expand and cause bubbles, just like air bubbles would. The best way to know if the quality of it, from what I understand, is if you hear like popping and crackling noises as it extrudes. It's like it's the sound of air bubbles coming out. And when it's printing, I don't notice that, but that might be because the motors are a little noisy. When it's not printing, filament kind of comes out slowly, which I guess from what I understand is normal for the filament to come out, just because the hot end is hot and it doesn't have any way for it to actually stop coming out. It doesn't come out very fast. I mean, maybe like a centimeter every minute or something like that, but it does make little crackling noises when it's just sitting there. I don't know if that's just because it's being squished out from the heat or what, but overall, I mean, the filament seems pretty decent. I got the natural colored, which is basically white and black. I haven't tested the black yet, but white seems to be okay. I turned up the temperature a little bit on the software for the white, just because I seem to have some sticking issues with the heat bed. I don't know if it seemed to help a little bit. I only turned it up by about 5 degrees Celsius. So, I mean, from what I hear, different colors actually require different temperatures, and you just got to experiment. So, I think I had the extruder at like 235, and I turned up the heat bed a little bit to help with adhesion to like 115, between 110 and 115. 110 is normal for ABS plastic. Now finally, I kind of want to talk about the learning curve with this printer. If you're kind of thinking about getting a 3D printer and you're looking at one, because this printer is only $350. If you look at other printers, that is actually pretty cheap. The other one I was looking at when I was considering 3D printers was the PrinterBot. That's printer without the E. It's the PrinterBot. And it was the PrinterBot Simple, I think. The main reason, and it is about a comparable price, but the main reason I was a little discouraged away from that one is the very small build area. It had a pretty small build area. It was only about, I think, 4 inches by 6 inches. So it was about as wide, but it wasn't anywhere near as deep on the y-axis. But that was the main reason I chose this one, because it was at a comparable price. You know, I wanted to have something that would give me flexibility in size. But anyways, as I was saying, I think learning curve is quite steep with 3D printers, and then to throw in the fact that this one does not have any sort of instructions on how to even assemble it. That was I think if you were if you're really kind of looking for a casual 3D printer, I would probably steer away from this one. It's gonna give you more headaches, and you might end up investing into it only to not have it work out for you. I don't want to say I have buyer's remorse, because that's not what I have. I mean, I'm eventually going to get it working perfectly. I mean, I have that kind of determination and the know-how to get it done, but I almost wish it was a little more plug and play. I feel like it needs a little bit of a help in order to get it going. But so like I said, if you're looking for a casual 3D printer, you may want to steer elsewhere to something that that's a little more ready-made than this was. But, you know, it's good for what it is. I don't really want to give a definite yes or no on this printer. You're just going to have to kind of go off of my experience, and if you're confident, if you know a lot about electronics, because if you know a lot about embedded electronics, like small electronics, and you can be confident that you'd be able to upload firmware and change settings, as well as assemble it just based on pictures, then, you know, go ahead and give it a try. I mean, send me a message if you need any help, or better yet, go to David. I mean, he seems to be quite knowledgeable on this printer, and he figured things out a little better than I did. But I'm willing to help you with anything that I can if you decide to get this printer. But so there's that. I mean, and there is the final product printed there for you on the screen. If you want to see like small detail pictures of my little thing, he was a little dwarf. I mean, I didn't know what else to print, so I printed him out. But anyways, if you like this video, just be sure to subscribe. If you like this kind of off-topic stuff, be sure to let me know as well. I mean, I kind of enjoy stepping away from regular video games every once in a while. Kind of gives me something different to do. But either way, have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.